Like, if you say something stupid, you are gonna be the one reaping the appropriate harvest, so to speak. And it would be, in my opinion, completely justified. You know, if you poke the bear, it is your problem that the bear is upon you. In this sense, there is no free poke, you know, just like there is no free speech. Greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert de Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. In this video, I want to talk about free speech and what is called the political correctness, or PC for short. So let's first talk about politics proper. Now, you may not remember, but in one of my older videos, I've talked about politics, like I gave my own definition of politics, which is a very broad one, which is roughly: politics is a decision-making in the situation of the conflict of interests, all right? So we certainly have to have some sort of conflict of interest to have politics. However, if you only have like two actors, then you only have like a raw, you know, mechanistic, you might say, collision of powers. However, if there are at least three actors already, then you have politics, okay? So you have this, again, decision-making in the situation of the conflict of interests. And today we have more than 8 billion of actors, more or less present in the same, you know, informational space. So there's plenty of room for politics. So much room, in fact, that for politics, I mean, that there is barely enough room for anything else, to be honest, right? So everything is politicized today, like history is political, economy is political, like art is political, philosophy is political, science is political, like even weather is political today, right? So even if you create today some absolutely like detached, you know, fantasy world, tomorrow you will see an article or an essay on YouTube claiming how very far right or far left or whatever you are, right, with your fantasy world. So, and everything is political by necessity, mind you, because most of the world is already developed enough by the people that in order to get any resources from the world, you don't actually have to interact with the world itself, but rather with the people that are developing this world, okay? Roughly speaking, you don't have to mine the resources, you just make a deal with the people who mine those resources, alright? Or at least distribute them or whatever. So, it quite noticeably happened, or it's not like happened, it's more like it was a slow transition, which more or less solidified at the end of the 1960s, where people started talking about the service economy, you know? So the shift from industrial economy, where people directly interacted with the world, into the service economy, where people are interacting with people now, right? It happened roughly at the end of the 1960s. By then, the world GDP, like more than half of it was already service-based, all right? And today it's like more like 68, I don't know, 72. So it's like, the absolute majority, 2/3 at least of the world's GDP is in services. So it's people interacting with people, not with the world. And hence, again, the importance of politics altogether. So people have all the power. Thus, to get anything you need, you have to be able to communicate with the people, right? So we live in society is a funny meme, of course, but it's also the truth, you know? Now we're slowly approaching the topic of political correctness and free speech in this video, all right? So think about the diplomats, okay? So diplomats have been around the people in power for a while, alright? So they've dealt with politics directly, even in like previous centuries, even before the world became 100% political, you might say, just like it is right now, sorry. So that's why, since the diplomats have been around, people in power, the diplomatic language was so careful and thoughtful and refined and filled with nuance, right? Because one reckless word might end not just your life, but perhaps life of your whole family, lives of your family members, I mean, and perhaps even end your whole nation, you know, your whole state, like whoever you're working for, whoever you're representing. Because, again, people in power, they have their own interests, and like, who knows how your words would resonate with their interests, or I don't know, if they're in an anti-phase, so to speak, right? So, yeah. At least it used to be that way, by the way, in terms of diplomacy. In this respect, it is symptomatic that modern day diplomacy is basically a joke. You know, like, if anything, modern day diplomacy shows that the public politics that we observe is just a theater, or a circus if you prefer, you know. Like only in a theatrical play can you allow yourself to say what modern politicians say to each other, or at least, you know, pronounce in the public sphere. So, like, if you want an argument in favor of some sort of shadowy government or something to that effect, there's at least this one, okay? Because only people who don't decide anything talk to each other like modern politicians do. That would be my point, alright? Because it literally doesn't matter what they say, if you think about it. They don't have anything to back it up anyway, alright? So they can say whatever they want. It doesn't matter anyway, right? Which again is a very stark contrast to the diplomatic speeches of, let's say, 18th century. Hopefully you get the idea. If your words actually matter, if you want to establish good communication with people to get what you want, again, as we've described, why would you not speak carefully? Why would you not be thoughtful, you know, about your words? Again, like the proverbial diplomats of the 18th century, it's very easy to get enemies otherwise. And why would you want any enemies? Like, you better watch what you say and be careful about it. This naive idea of free speech is exactly that. It's very naive, you know. Like, of course, we are very used to it, being born and raised in the American world, established after World War II, right? As we've discussed many times on this channel. For example, watch my video about the coming end of American hegemony and how economy doesn't really matter a whole lot in this respect. But this world of free speech, this free world, is a fiction, essentially. Like, for someone to be able to speak freely, there has to be some overwhelming power standing behind them. And realistically, there's simply no such power in existence. Again, there was an illusion of such power during the American hegemony, where, again, America was this power, kind of supporting free speech and freedom and human rights and blah, blah, blah everywhere, right? But now even this illusion is dissolving rather quickly, okay? Right in front of our eyes, actually. Now, there are, all that being said, some people who actually are privileged by the possibility of speaking the truth, with, like, no strings attached, like, you know, no political correctness needed. But they are the exact people who have nothing to lose, essentially, you know. Mostly they are philosophers, actually. And Diogenes, the famous guy who lived in a barrel, is the perfect example of that, alright? It's a canonical example, you might say. But to a large degree, any other philosopher has the same trait. And perhaps some philosophers, but that's still has to be proven, alright? So we're talking about the people who are more concerned with being, you know, with a capital B, itself, rather than their own small being, you know, sitting in a barrel or something. And as pompous as it may sound, these are the people who may willingly sacrifice themselves for the truth. So they are the ones who may take this risk. But decent people, probably not. Again, if you want to live, if you want to prosper, then probably don't do it, you know. Like, the truth doesn't really worth it. And even philosophers may not even do it. I mean, speak the truth regardless of the outcome, let's put it this way. They may also refuse to do it or refrain from doing it, at least, for example, because they're not just interested. For example, like, there is no point in speaking out a certain truth, let's put it this way, right? At the moment, or maybe in general, you know. There is this tale which is attributed to Socrates, the Greek philosopher, but it's definitely a modern invention. So the earliest example of this tale I found was in Children's New Church magazine of 1872, okay? So it must have been invented around that time. So it's called the Sieves of Socrates, okay? And the idea is that somebody approaches Socrates and says, hey, do you know that this guy told me about this other guy? And Socrates said, wait. Don't tell me that. First, you have to strain it through 3 different sieves. Like, first, you have to tell me whether it is true. Like, are you sure this is true that you're gonna communicate to me about this other guy? He says, well, no, it's not. I'm not sure. Whether it is good or kind towards this guy, he says, no, it's actually the reverse. and whether it's useful or, you know, necessary for me to know this. And he says, no, it's probably not. And Socrates says then, shut up, please. I don't need this information. That it's probably not even true. That it's probably not good, right? It's probably not useful. Like, let's not talk about those things. So it's a good, you know, good kind of thing to think about. Don't say it if it's not true. It's not good, even though I would say it's debatable. This second point. I mean, and if it's not necessary or, you know, useful in any sort of way, okay? Like if it would make us help, if it would help us make better decisions, then definitely, even if it's probably not true, maybe it would, you know, kind of make us think about some things. But this second point about kindness and goodness, I'm not even sure if it's necessary, you know? Like telling someone like, hey, your shoelace is untied is very useful and it's true, right? But it fails to pass this second point of kindness or goodness, even though it's still very useful. Just tell somebody, you know, why it's not kind. Well, it's because it kind of means that, hey, you're sloppy, you know, your shoelace is untied. It's an unpleasant truth, but still it is truth, and it's useful to know, you know, because who knows, maybe this guy will fall because of this, right? Because of the untied shoelace. So it's better to say this. That's my point. So I don't agree with the author of this legend, let's put it this way, in the second point, but I do agree with the truth and usefulness. Like, these definitely have to be satisfied in order to say something even unkind, alright? So, this long monologue of mine was to show you that it's probably not even useful to speak out a lot, you know, like certain things, let's put it this way, even if they are true. So they might be true, but it may not be good or useful to speak them up. So even philosophers would refrain from doing so, right? Because why would you? Like, it's just stupid, unwise. And here's where actually political correctness comes in, finally. Like, if something is true, it may not be good or useful, or both, to say it, right? And it's a very wise policy, I would claim. So people are flawed, and everyone is flawed in a different way. And it may not be useful at all to call people out just for the sake of truth only, you know? Like, you have to think about those things. Like, hence I actually praise political correctness, perhaps not in its present form, I mean, that's debatable, but as an idea, you know? It's sort of a diplomatic speech of 21st century, right? We all have to learn how to live together, essentially. And why would we piss each other off for no reason? That just makes no sense, you know? Like, in our case, the truth is, like, you live in a world full of different people, and if some manner of speaking, let's say, offends them, like, why would you want to do it? Like, it's just useless, stupid, and childish. It's actually irresponsible, I would say. So, the issue of responsibility, of course, quite recently raised by Jordan Peterson, for example, that's one of his main achievements, I would say, in a good type of way. By the way, watch my video about Jordan Peterson. Quite an old one, actually. Anyway, the issue of responsibility is a big one today. And I think the key thing to realize for a modern person is that they are responsible for their own life. That's what many people don't realize. Like, leftists are actively against it. Like, no, somebody else made my life, you know, and keep making my life. Like, I have no impact on it whatsoever. And it's just dishonest at the very least, right? So anyway, getting a bunch of enemies just because you really, I emphasize this word, want to say something is unwise. It is, for the lack of a better word, a sin against yourself, I would say, first and foremost. So think about this. Like, if you say something stupid, you are going to be the one reaping the appropriate harvest, so to speak. And it would be, in my opinion, completely justified. You know, if you poke the bear, it is your problem that the bear is upon you. In this sense, there is no free poke, you know, just like there is no free speech, except in some fantasy world. That being said, all of it doesn't mean that your actions shouldn't be informed by the truth, right? So you have to listen to philosophers, or maybe philosophers as well. So you have to be informed by the truth rather than the politically correct curtain in front of the truth. This is a thing that makes actually many people rather uncomfortable, right? Because, and understandably so, because it brings this sort of quasi-schizophrenic doubling of the world, you know. There is the world as it is. I mean, we are being, sorry, I probably tapped on the mic. We are probably being, not probably, we are being like gnoseologically naive here, and we assume that there is truth, even though there is not. By the way, watch my even older, probably, video, Nature of Knowledge, where I claim that not any knowledge is just a bunch of stories we tell each other. Anyway, for the sake of this discussion, we're assuming naively there is truth. Which is, again, false, but we assume this. And there is this politically correct diplomatic coating on top of the truth that we may speak up freely and which would not piss too many people off, alright? So there is this doubling of the world into two layers, so to speak. And it makes people uncomfortable, alright? I'll tell you who it doesn't make uncomfortable, or rather, who are used to it. It's the post-Soviet people. So in Soviet Union, it used to be the case that, you know, for the sake of, like, if some government official asks you about something, you of course have to say the diplomatic part, but among your friends in the kitchen when you're drinking tea or vodka or whatever, you can talk about politics openly, you know, in a truthful kind of manner. So post-Soviet people are very well used to this double speak, or whatever you may call it, alright? So the truth versus, you know, the, how do you call it? The shopping window, you know? The propaganda, basically, yeah? Politically correct propaganda. So anyway, these are obviously two different things, and you have to kind of keep it in mind. You just have to get used to this, I guess. Again, try to get used to living among other people. Like, I don't know what to tell you. The world is a complex thing, you know. The society is a complex thing. The Frenchies, actually, you know, the structuralists, post-structuralists, postmodernists have tried to warn you about it in, again, late 1960s, when the industrial economy have been surpassed by service economy, at least in terms of volume, alright? So, remember the La Société du Spectacle, you know, by Guy Debord, and all the works like that from the French school, let's put it this way, of philosophy of 1960s. So yeah, anyway, to conclude, I think this video was mostly like praising political correctness and like just like, of course, in some fantasy world, in some fictional world, we're all libertarians, everything is allowed, you know, just because we are, hopefully, at least decent people ourselves, right? But, it's only in a fantasy world, unfortunately, right? In the real world, things are very different. So yeah, so I would say that the best strategy is to just follow the rules, you know, like follow the etiquette, you know. Etiquette is a big thing, or political correctness is the etiquette of speech, if you wish. But at the same time, you gotta understand their purpose, you know, which is basically just not to upset people, not to make more enemies than necessary, let's put it this way. And you have to also understand the fact that it has little to do with reality, right? It's just the way we have to speak. Just, you know, pragmatically even, you know. And your actions and decisions obviously have to be grounded in reality, in the truth rather than the fiction of diplomatic speech. So yeah. I want to end with two quotes from, again, supposedly a free speech advocate, a French philosopher, Voltaire. I've already mentioned him in a couple of videos. The most recent one was about Don Quixote. Watch the link in the description. Anyway, so supposedly he was a free speech advocate, right? But these two quotes will show you how wise he was. He was a very wise person, all right? So he understood the importance of diplomacy and etiquette and what we might call today political correctness. So the quote number one says, to succeed in the world, it is not enough to be stupid. One must also be polite. And the quote number two says, etiquette is the mind for those who don't have one of their own. Thank you for watching. The eons are closing. If you wish to support me, please consider joining my Patreon. That is patreon.com/philosopher. See the link in the description. Or if you have a scientific theory of your own and you'd like my help in developing it, please join my alternative science coaching program, also available through Patreon.